فنعرف أن المصدر وكالة ناسا. نسمع عن أول من صعد إلى سطح القمر فنعرف أنه من ناسا. كيف نصل إلى ناسا؟ وما هي الأجواء يا ترى داخل ناسا؟ To know all of that, we have a conference call with the Dr. Mamta. The conversation will be with Engineer Abdurrahman. He had a master in electrical engineer. Please welcome them.
So good evening everyone. We would like first to welcome Dr. Mamta.
Okay, are you ready?
Yeah, we will.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to telling you a little bit about myself and my path, but I'd really like to leave it largely open to your questions. So after I tell you a little bit about how I got to NASA, I'll tell you about some of our big astrophysicists and astronomy programs, astrophysics and astronomy programs, and then I'll open up to questions and allow this to be more of a dialogue.
Yeah.
I'm not an astrophysicist myself, I am an engineer, but if you ask any questions that I can't answer, I will take it away and get the answers back to you through the embassy.
Yeah, so
if we can start the slides.
So just before that, we'd like to...
We'll begin with my story briefly. As I mentioned, I'm a spaceflight engineer at NASA. I've been doing this for about 15 or 16 years, including as a student. This is my family. I come from a large family with 4 girls and 1 boy for siblings, and parents who immigrated from India to the United States in 1978. We are all now married, as you can see, with children, and we tend to try to enjoy life as much as we can with those children. Next slide. My family is a large part of how I got to what was my dream job when I was growing up. I dreamt to explore the skies, whether it was to become an astronaut or to use a telescope, but I always was fascinated, like many of you, with what was in the skies. So my parents, as I mentioned, immigrated from India, up a western state called Gujarat, which you can see in the red circled area on the left-hand side. They immigrated to California in western United States, where they worked in a factory line for an electronics company. They wanted something better than what they had in India, which was a tough life of poverty. And so when they got to the US, they tried to do something better than an electronics company, and they ended up moving to Texas, where they purchased a small motel, and our family ran that motel. We did the cleaning, the repairs, managing the office, all of that, and it's largely how I grew to be who I am today, from a small town in West Texas. From there, I went to college, and I studied aerospace engineering at Texas A&M, which is in eastern Texas. And while at Texas A&M, I had the opportunity, and the US is very common in engineering for students to do what we called then a cooperative education or a co-op program. And what that means is you go, while you're in college, you study for 1 semester, and then you go to a company and you work for a semester. And then you come back to school and you continue until you finish your courses and you graduate. And so I had the opportunity to do this at NASA's Johnson Space Center, which is in Houston, Texas. You may be familiar with it if you've heard one of the more famous sayings from the moon landings in the 60s, Houston, we have a problem. So if that's familiar to you, that Houston is where mission control is, and that's where I spent most of my career, including that as a student. I knew I wanted a PhD, so from my co-op at Johnson Space Center, I continued to Georgia Tech, which is in the US, one of the top engineering universities, and I studied mechanical engineering and biomedical engineering for my master's and my PhD. And then I pursued a full-time position at NASA, where I am today, and that's where you and I meet together. Next slide. Along the way, I got to do some things that I didn't even know existed as a young child or as a young adult. One of my first assignments was to learn how to become an instructor for the astronauts and train them to know what they need to know, including emergency actions should they ever face an emergency, but also living in space day to day when there is no action, when there is no emergency, and they're performing maintenance. So these are the types of things that I became an expert in, and then we trained the astronauts. And as an instructor, you are the technical expert. So if the astronauts have a question about something, we don't teach them everything because they have to learn the entire system. If they ever have a question, then they come to us as the experts, and then we dig up the answer and get it back to them. And I did this for both the International Space Station program, which we still have up in space, as well as the Space Shuttle program, which has since been retired. Next slide. I mentioned before the famous saying, Houston, we have a problem, and that was Houston Mission Control. And so here you see a few images of dear friends of mine and myself working in Mission Control. This was for Space Shuttle Flight STS-131, for those who are familiar, or 19A for the International Space Station. And Mission Control is a place where you are monitoring all of your systems. If you can see in the pictures, you'll see, you can't see them, but there's tiny little numbers, and you'll see green and cyan. Some of them may be red or yellow, and we use that to help us know if a system is working on the space station or not working, and if we can fix it. And it allows us to see what emergency or what equipment may be failing, maybe not an emergency, but is failing. And so my main job there was, when I was working there, was to move the cameras. We have 4 of the cameras on the International Space Station which are able to look at our planet. And we use those for various reasons. Sometimes it's to look at an astronaut doing a spacewalk, or sometimes it's to look at hurricanes as they're forming in the ocean and then moving closer to a landmass. And then we'll take that information and give it to the appropriate country's main weather station, so that they can warn their residents of evacuation. So that's an example of where we might use it that affects people directly. And then we may also just use it for operations on the International Space Station. So we have a visual on our astronauts, and we're able to help them as they go through their repair and maintenance of whatever their agenda is for that particular day. And largely, because we're now in the digital age, if something breaks from the International Space Station, oftentimes we can fix it from mission control, and it doesn't necessarily require an astronaut to do. And then there's some things that need a physical hand, and so that's where we would communicate directly with them, and they would aid us in fixing whatever is broken. Otherwise, we're generally operating and maintaining an awareness of all of the systems on the space station, which does house at all times 6 astronauts from various countries across the world. Next slide. I've also gotten to participate in some of our science missions, and so these are missions that go up without any humans on board. Their primary reason for flying is to obtain some sort of science. So largely in your area of interest in astrophysics or astronomy, that's where these science missions would come into play. And I'll talk about a couple of them as we proceed through the slides. In my case, I work on planetary missions. That's missions that we send in our solar system. So I worked on a proposal to send a mass spectrometer to Venus to study the atmosphere in Venus, as well as the surface, as well as we have the materials on them to get there. So that's what we were proposing to build. And then also a mission called LADEE, which was the Lunar Atmosphere and Dust Environment Explorer, and it was a mission to the moon we performed about 3 years ago. And that was to study the thin exosphere of the moon, as well as the dust once it impacted to the moon. Next slide. I have had the pretty rare opportunity. This last selection for astronaut in the U.S. Garnered about 18,000 plus applications, and NASA often will do interviews for a maximum of 120, and I was lucky enough to be selected to be interviewed. It is actually much tougher to be interviewed when we work for NASA. We largely, if you look at our astronaut pool, they largely come from outside of NASA, and that's for a particular reason. We want that change in perspective of people who have done their careers in areas that are outside of NASA, and they bring that perspective to us and to the astronaut program. But I was lucky enough to get to be selected. This is from this last selection. You'll see in the upper right is getting our bone density scan. We know astronauts lose bone when they go into space without the effects of gravity. So that's one thing they do check. And then some tours that they showed us of some of the mock-ups that NASA has. And you can see the group up in the upper left that was interviewed. often get the question of how I think I have found my own success, and I'd say it's role models and mentors. To the left is my current supervisor, who has really enabled me to be able to be creative and do my work and allow the guidance I need to flourish in my career. And to the right is one of my favorite astronauts. I did not know her before I interviewed, but when I met her name is Megan McArthur-Bankin. When I met her, I really looked at her and I thought, I could be an astronaut. If they selected you, then I could be one. She and I are very similar, except she has an awesome job. But other than that, we're similar in personality. And when I look at her, I really think that I could possibly become an astronaut someday. Next slide. So let me tell you a little bit more about the science we do at NASA at a very high level, and then we'll start taking questions. So NASA breaks up our Science Mission Directorate into 4 main areas. That's the heliophysics area, the study of the sun and the magnetic field and how the sun interacts with Earth. And then the study of our own planet and Earth science. And then planetary science, which is the study of the moons and the planets in our own solar system. And then when we move out of the solar system and we're studying anything out of the universe is astrophysics, where many of your interests probably lie. Next slide. We have 3 main themes that we focus on in science. One is to safeguard and to improve the life on Earth. And then, of course, the search for life elsewhere, the ultimate question, are we alone? And then expanding our knowledge, what else is out in the universe? And those are the 3 main things that we're looking to do for NASA science. Next slide. And searching for life elsewhere, right now we have a rover on Mars. It's been there since 2012. It's named Curiosity, and it's the size of approximately a sport utility vehicle and SUV, to give you an idea of how big it is. On board, it has its own laboratory, so you'll also have maybe heard it called the Mars Science Laboratory, or MSL. And it is one of our planetary missions that is searching whether or not Mars had the components of life necessary to have had life on it in the past, or maybe it currently does as well. You can see in this image of Mars the polar cap, where we have seen evidence of water as well. And at least for the life as we know it here on Earth, we know water is a vital part of that in order for life to exist. So these are some of the areas that we're interested in and we'll continue to explore. We do have a mission slated with the European Space Agency as well to continue this mission and searching for life elsewhere. Next slide. We also know that there are ocean worlds, or what NASA is calling ocean worlds. These are other bodies in our solar system that have the potential to have water, or evidence that we have gotten that there is water on these worlds. So I will let the IT team play a video that will explain to you more about ocean worlds.
Ocean worlds. Presented by Science at NASA. Earth, a world dominated by water. Trillions of gallons flow freely across the surface of our blue-green planet. While we once thought oceans made our planet unique, we're now coming to realize that ocean worlds are all around us. Our planet retains its atmosphere and, in turn, its abundance of liquid water, thanks in part to a very strong magnetic field, which provides protection from the solar wind. Without this magnetic field, our atmosphere would be stripped away, leaving the pale blue dot looking more like one of our neighbors. Scientists believe Venus's early oceans evaporated. With no water left on the surface, carbon dioxide builds up in the atmosphere, leading to a runaway greenhouse effect that created present conditions. Likewise, Mars appears to have had oceans long ago, but the red planet's global magnetic field decayed, leaving it vulnerable to atmospheric erosion by the solar wind. Farther from the sun, in the sub-freezing temperatures of the outer solar system, it may seem impossible for liquid water to exist. However, not only does it exist, but in some places, it may be more abundant than on Earth. Jupiter is orbited by at least 3 moons that contain oceans: Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. Europa is crisscrossed by cracks and semi-rectangular features that look like ice rafts frozen into the surface. Below those immobile icebergs, researchers believe there is a vast ocean just below the icy crust, warmed by the tidal forces of Jupiter, containing about twice as much water as is found on Earth. In 2014 and 2016, the Hubble Space Telescope has observed what appear to be water vapor plumes coming out of the cracks near the South Pole. Photos of Ganymede from the Galileo space probe show ancient ice floes frozen into its surface. Moreover, Hubble has looked at Ganymede's auroras and seen signs suggesting an ocean's worth of salt water. Hiding beneath a thick crust of ice, the ocean on Ganymede could actually harbor as much as 4 times more water than all of Earth's oceans combined. Callisto also seems to contain a saltwater ocean beneath the icy crust, betraying its presence by the effects of Callisto on Jupiter's overlying magnetic field. In 2005, NASA's Cassini spacecraft found Saturn's moon Enceladus, visibly pumping plumes of water vapor and organic compounds out through fissures now known as tiger stripes in its frozen carapace. Cassini flew through the plumes frequently since then and has discovered nanosilica grains and the presence of molecular hydrogen, both suggesting the movement of heated water on the seafloor of the icy moon. Other evidence provided by Cassini has convinced researchers that Enceladus has a global subsurface ocean stealing into space through these tiger stripes. Saturn's E-ring, the planet's second outermost ring, was actually formed from this water and ice. Saturn's largest moon, Titan, has a landscape dotted with lakes and seas. The liquid on Titan's surface is not, however, H2O. Researchers believe the fluid sculpting Titan's surface is a mixture mostly of methane with smaller amounts of ethane and other hard-to-freeze hydrocarbons. Other bodies around the solar system also show signs of liquid water. In 2014, scientists using the European Space Agency-led Herschel Space Observatory detected water vapor coming from 2 regions of the dwarf planet Ceres. NASA's Dawn probe reached Ceres in 2015, and while the water vapor had subsided, there were other signs of water. Abuna Mons is an ice mountain apparently formed from repeated eruptions of salty, muddy water. Also, widely reported bright spots in Ceres' crater Alcator are thought to be deposits of salt left behind by the escape and sublimation of briny water from below. Even distant Pluto may be an ocean world. As revealed by the recent flyby of New Horizons, Pluto's strangely molded surface features suggest the presence of a liquid underground. As astronomers look beyond our solar system, they are finding exoplanets of sizes and distances from their stars that could have oceans. And based on our solar system, these exoplanets could potentially have moons with oceans as well. The locations of water within the diverse environments of our own planetary system will guide and inform the search for oceans beyond our solar system. Next time you look out over the ocean, think about our neighboring worlds. They may have more in common with our own ocean world than we once believed was possible. For more news about oceans, at home and abroad, stay tuned to science.nasa.gov.
Great, so as you saw from the video, we have these exciting places in our own solar system that could potentially harbor the right ingredients for life. And so there's an entire contingent in exploring these ocean worlds with future missions, as well as our current ones. Next slide. And so there's life within, the potential for life within our own solar system, but there are many, and possibly those in the room right now, who believe that exoplanets might harbor the right ingredients potentially for life outside of our own solar system. And so the hunt for exoplanets is largely done for NASA by a mission called Kepler. And Kepler has found numerous exoplanets, some that seem to be Earth-like. From what we can tell with Kepler, but we'll know more as we get into the future astrophysics missions, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But one of the more exciting exoplanet discoveries actually was found by not Kepler, which finds most of our exoplanets, but if you go to the next slide, by the Spitzer Space Telescope, and this just happens to be the location of Spitzer and the particular dwarf star that it located, TRAPPIST-1, and the planets around it, that Spitzer was able to do it. And this is the TRAPPIST-1 system. For those who may have already heard this in the news, but those who haven't, I'll briefly go over it and then we'll show a video to talk about it. So on the left is an artist rendering of what the surface of one of these planets may look like, but I do caution that it is only an artist rendering. We don't really know anything about these planets other than that they exist, that they're going around the star called TRAPPIST-1, and that all of their orbits are inside what would be that of Mercury in our own solar system relative to our own sun. So they're closely orbiting TRAPPIST-1, which is a much dimmer, much fainter star than our own sun. So rather than continuing to talk about TRAPPIST-1 right now, let's watch the video and then I'll follow up on the next slide with some more information about it. But now we can watch the video of the TRAPPIST-1 system.
Imagine a place with not one, not two, but 7 Earth-sized planets all orbiting a single star. It's not just science fiction, thanks to a new discovery by NASA's Spitzer Space Telescope. TRAPPIST-1, an ultra-cool dwarf star just under 40 light years away, plays host to this incredible collection of planets. In 2016, astronomers using the TRAPPIST telescope at the La Silla Observatory in Chile first identified 3 Earth-sized planets here. The discovery warranted extensive follow-up by Spitzer, whose infrared detectors are particularly sensitive to the cool glow of this tiny star. Spitzer devoted over 21 days of nearly continuous observations to TRAPPIST-1, pausing only to send data back to Earth. It was looking for tiny disks in the star's brightness when the circling planets passed in front of the star were transiting. From this extensive data set, astronomers confirmed 2 of the 3 previously reported planets and found the third was really 3 different ones, plus it discovered 2 more for a total of 7. The transits tell us a lot about these planets, including their size, orbital period, distance from the star, and for some of them, their approximate mass and density. NASA's Hubble Space Telescope followed up by studying the transits, looked for the harmful fingerprint of hydrogen gas in the exoplanet atmosphere. While the search continues, none has been found yet, adding support to the idea that these are all rocky terrestrial worlds. That makes this a planetary system that is both familiar yet exotic. It is likely most, if not all, of these planets perpetually keep one face pointed toward their star, a phenomenon called tidal locking. This would create large temperature gradients across their surfaces and offer the possibility that open water could exist on any of them under the right conditions. Moreover, if you could stand on the surface of one of these worlds and look up at your neighboring planets in the sky, they would at times appear larger than our moon looks to us. That's because TRAPPIST-1 is only a little bigger than Jupiter, and the TRAPPIST-1 planets fall only a little farther apart than Jupiter's moons. Interplanetary trips here will be measured in days, not months or years like in our solar system. For now, we can only speculate what these exoplanets might be like, as we still know relatively little about them. Upcoming missions like the James Webb Space Telescope will study the TRAPPIST-1 system in greater detail and uncover more clues about the atmospheres and compositions of these 7 Earth-sized worlds.
And excellent, next slide, please. So the TRAPPIST-1 system, as you heard in the video and as you can see on the slide, is a system of planets. And if you look at what's circled there, and you may not be able to see the numbers, but I'll point out, it's the planet mass. And relative to the Earth size, they are all but one a fraction of what the Earth's mass is. So you can see they're much smaller than Earth, but many of them are in the habitable zone, the Goldilocks zone, where we think life could occur. They're at the right distance from the sun where you could have liquid water exist, at least in life as we know it today here on our planet. So that's what's really exciting about this system. And next slide. I believe the video also mentioned the James Webb Space Telescope, which will allow us to actually get the first evidence of whether or not life could exist on these exoplanets. And particularly, we'll be looking at the sun system as well, since we already have so much data behind the system and the discovery has been made about this particular solar system. When James Webb flies next year and once it's set up and ready to start looking deep into the skies, and it can see much deeper than the Hubble Space Telescope, which is out in space today. This telescope will likely be able to give us some data and know whether or not there's an atmosphere on those planets and give us the first signs of whether or not life could exist on those planets. And the James Webb Space Telescope is slated to fly next year in partnership with the European Space Agency as well. And we can watch our last video on the web as astronomers and astrophysicists yourself. I think you'll be interested in this particular space telescope for those who may not have seen much about it. So we'll watch this last video as well.
Shake, rattle, and fold. Ready your Webb telescope for launch. Presented by Science at NASA. The most sophisticated space science telescope ever constructed, the James Webb Space Telescope, JWST, is targeted to launch in October 2018. With a primary mirror 3 times as wide as the Hubble Space Telescope and a special sensitivity to penetrating infrared radiation, Webb will peer into the far reaches of the universe to reveal how the first stars and galaxies formed after the Big Bang. Stringent testing is underway to prove it can handle an earth-shaking takeoff and still capture the universe's first light while deeply ensconced in the hyper-cold of space. At NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, engineers are testing Webb's science payload in special facilities simulating launch vibration and noise. Eric Smith is the JWST Program Director and Program Scientist.
This is the most dynamically complex launch telescope ever subjected to vibration test by NASA. The telescope must deploy in a precisely synchronized sequence as the temperature drops to near absolute zero on its journey to relativity. Webb has many interconnected parts of different stiffnesses. All those parts, including the folded stereo instruments and mirrors, have to survive launch at room temperature. These elements must then all come together seamlessly in the extreme cold to form perfect optical images. All materials change shape as they cool. Flower blossom, marshmallow, even some metals will shatter or break if hyperfrozen and drop onto a hard surface or bend. All of Webb's components, once assembled, must cool and move in precisely the right way so that the ultra-fine optical tolerances are met and everything is cold. Think of being able to repeatedly parallel park your car and know the position of your back bumper to within the 10th diameter of a human hair. That's how accurate we must be in knowing the position of our mirror surfaces.
To make this happen, Webb is vibration tested at Goddard, and it will undergo cryogenic testing at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Cryogenic testing involves taking the entire telescope instrument package to a temperature of approximately 40 degrees below absolute zero. That's a very chilly minus 388 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 198 degrees Celsius, and making sure its components work as predicted. The science instruments, mirror segments, and mirror-based structure were co-tested previously. At Johnson, the whole assembly, instrument module plus mirrors, will be cryogenically tested together for the first time. Upon proving it's up to cold snuff, Webb's science section will travel to a Northrop Grumman facility in Redondo Beach, California, for attachment to the spacecraft bus and sunshield. After further vibration and acoustic testing, it's off to French Guiana for a launch atop an Ariane 5 rocket.
Seeing our hopes realized in intricate and awe-inspiring hardware is thrilling. Of course, the ultimate goal of the mission is not the hardware itself, but the knowledge it will return. We're just now beginning to once again reach out to the science research community for their ideas of what to observe with Webb, and that is the most exciting part by far.
For more news about NASA's next great space telescope, stay tuned to science.nasa.gov.
So I think the discoveries that we'll see in the next 5 years are going to be some of the most exciting things we'll learn about our universe. And I know that this group will probably be tuned into those findings as we discover them, not just at NASA but across the world. I think scientists who analyze the data come across the world from our space telescopes, Hubble currently, the James Webb Space next year. But I think we have one of the most exciting times for astronomy and astrophysics coming. Next slide. And I'll leave you with a little insight into something that would not make it into the news. And so this is one of our most recently selected astrophysics missions, XP, or the Imaging X-ray Polarimetry Explorer, which will delve into learning more about the universe as well. And it is now just getting started. We just funded this mission among a few other astrophysics missions also. And I think combined with our bigger scale missions like James Webb, as I said, I think we're looking at the next 5 or 10 years of very exciting learning opportunities for what's out in our universe. And last slide, before we take questions, I leave you just with one more clip. One of my favorite quotes, something from the great Albert Einstein: the important thing is to not stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. I hope you enjoyed and learned something from the talk, and I'm happy to take any questions now for the remainder of our time.
I'd like to thank you, Dr. Mamta, for your time and your great presentation. Now we'll start asking some of the questions that we received from the audience. So the first question is basically, it was multiple questions within the same context, asking you as a woman working for NASA about like the advice for young students or even high school students who would like to pursue such a career in NASA or the space agencies, how to select their role models and how to fight for their goals without putting the virtual boundaries between them and their goals.
Absolutely. I'd say the first piece of advice I give to any young student wanting to pursue the sciences is to not be afraid to ask. So you have to maybe observe and look for the people around you who you think might help you and enable you to pursue your dreams, to pursue them, and not those who are going to stop you, either for cultural or societal reasons or for other reasons. If you really want to do something, whether it's at NASA or some other space agency or astronomy, which you can do from anywhere, right? You don't have to be at NASA to do something like this. If the sciences and engineering really interests you and that's where your strengths are, I would say look around you, be observant. You don't have to be vocal for it, but just be observant and find the person or the people around you who you think might help you. And personally, I don't think it will hurt. Even if you upset them, they'll probably forgive you sooner or later. But if you don't ask, you won't find that person who can help you. I think role models and mentors are really important, at least where I come from, both from my cultural background as well as the American culture. But I think role models and mentors are important. They help enable us, they have experience that we don't have, especially when you're younger, and that person may be older than you, even if slightly older than you. Experience really takes it gives a lot of information that you don't realize until you've gone through it yourself. So I'd say don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, I think that's the most important point. And as a follow-up question that we also just received, so part of the audience are asking if you would recommend some online courses or some routes for them to start learning about astronomy and the related topics, maybe?
Some online courses.
It's like some online courses to learn about the astronomy, like through NASA or through some other organizations that you'd recommend from your experience?
Yes, I will send them over to share with you. There are some online courses and online material that can be used for anyone who's looking to educate themselves more on astrophysics as well as amateur astronomy.
Okay, that's perfect. So the next cluster of questions were targeted about life on other planets. So some questions were asking about the possibility of finding water or pure water on other planets, and how can that serve in finding life or even the simplest forms of life on these planets. So what are your thoughts about that and or based on the current state-of-the-art discoveries by NASA, I would say?
Yeah, so if I understood the question correctly, it's talking about finding water and other signs of life on planets in our own solar system?
Exactly, yes. It's basically on our solar system and elsewhere, with the exoplanets discovery and all of that. So it's basically in our solar system, yes, but even with the extension of the exoplanets being discovered nowadays, so how can all of that serve towards finding signs of life, and how can, for example, the recent discovery of water on Mars, how does that fall within this category?
Correct, yes. So I think there's going to be multiple. So within our multiple ways. So within our solar system, it's easier for us to get to, of course. When we're talking about exoplanets, we're talking about light years away, so far away that it's not feasible for us to even send a robotic mission. So within our own solar system, what NASA, in partnership with other countries as well, what we mainly try to do is specify a mission. So we build an actual mission and an actual spacecraft solely to go to a destination where we suspect there might be either water in some form, either frozen or liquid, because we have some evidence from it. So for example, we have evidence from the Mars Science Laboratory about potentially frozen water. Then we're designing a follow-up spacecraft that will go to those locations just to study that. So it's easier when it's within our solar system because we can design for it and we understand our solar system better than we make these other exoplanets. We are exploring, we have a mission to Titan. In the books that we'll be going there, we know that there's large methane lakes, so it's not hydrogen and oxygen like our water here on Earth, but we suspect at least we have evidence that there are large methane lakes and seas all over Titan. So we have a future mission that's going there. We know that there's frozen, or we have evidence that there's frozen water in Enceladus, another moon in our solar system. And so we'll have a mission in the future that's going there as well. When we're talking about outside of our solar system and these recent exoplanet discoveries, that's where James Webb is really going to come in. So James Webb will have the ability with the large mirrors to be able to see deeper into the universe and actually look for signs of, the first time to be an atmosphere. So we know for water to exist, the planet likely has to have an atmosphere, and an atmosphere big enough to allow for that water to reside. We know that we'll go to these rocky planets that are in the habitable zone because that's the distance from the sun that water is most likely to exist, at least in liquid form. So these are the types of knowledge and pieces that we'll put out when we go and explore. And James Webb will be the key to determining for exoplanets whether or not there is even any sign of life, at least the life that we know here on Earth. So that's, I think, what we're going to be looking forward to is James Webb. And then within our own solar system, some of these missions to these moons and other ocean worlds, as you learned in the video, I think that's what we have to look forward to. But a lot of these questions we just don't know. We have evidence, chemical evidence from what we've done in our past missions, but we don't really know. So I think that's the next step. We'll probably see it in the next decade or so.
The next question is basically talking about the aspect of Earth protection in terms of the asteroids. So it says, how do you monitor asteroids that might enter the Earth's atmosphere? Is there any threat an asteroid might hit Earth? If yes, what will be the NASA plan, or basically the space agency's plan to change its trajectories? What are the scenarios or the expected scenarios? Does it pose a real threat for us as humans?
Yes, so I do know, this is one area I don't know much about, and I imagine it's probably because of the nature of the work of planetary defense, or what we call planetary defense, planetary protection. So I do know that we monitor, we have a group that monitors these asteroids. There's not one known to be close enough on a trajectory to Earth, that I can say certainly. We had one pass by that was very close to Earth, but we're still talking about thousands and thousands of miles away from Earth, but the closest that we've had one pass by recently, there was no danger to life on Earth that we could see as we projected its path around the planet, or past the planet in this case. But we do have people actively looking at it. As far as what we would do, if we were to find in the future someday that one was on a course that would be on the trajectory towards us or impacting us, I don't know that. I imagine, again, it's probably a group of people at NASA who's studying it on a level completely different from mine and a much higher level than mine. So I can't answer that question directly, other than to say that we have a group actively looking at and tracking these bodies in the system as well as they get closer to our orbit.
Okay. So another question that we have here is basically asking about the technology that we have in order to study distant objects such as the black holes and neutron stars. So the person who's asking the question is basically trying to know if there is a time frame or planned time frame for upcoming projects that would focus on such topics, to have more information about them maybe?
Yeah, so I think this is one that I'll take away, and the reason is we do have missions that we've just selected and just funded in order to study topics such as black holes, as well as gravitational waves, and this X-ray calorimetry mission that I mentioned briefly at the end of the presentation. There's probably about 3 to 5 of those, and if it is okay with you, because I think it'll be more beneficial, I'll send those to the embassy as well when I send the online courses.
And the next question is asking about Curiosity program. Like I think it was mentioned briefly in the presentation, but the question here about the expected time frame for it to achieve its objectives. Like it will be in service until what time, and are there other planned missions with more sophisticated technologies that will be sent to Mars or are planned to follow Curiosity, for instance?
Could you say that question one more time?
Okay. So basically the question is asking about Curiosity rover and its objectives and goals. So when do you think that it will be achieving all of that? And based on that, what are the planned projects for future in terms of Mars discovery? What are there any planned rovers to be sent to Mars following Curiosity?
Yeah, so from I couldn't understand the first part, but the second part about Mars, there is a planned rover that's being developed now, but eventually will end up at Mars, but it's not for a while. It's still in development, and that's with the European Space Agency as well. Right now, currently, we still have Maven that's operating, that's going around Mars. India has their Mars satellite as well, going around Mars. And then we have the Mars Science Laboratory. So we're focusing mostly on those 2 NASA missions going around Mars, but there is a plan to send a rover in the future as well. We've also, oh, I see. Okay, so you're asking particularly about Curiosity, the Curiosity rover. So for the Curiosity rover or the Mars Science Laboratory rover, that one has exceeded the number of years we thought it would operate. So now we're operating for as long as it will go until it completely dies on the planet, but it is currently going very well forward.
Okay.
And it houses multiple instruments, like a massive dig into Mars, and that's largely how we've gotten a lot of information about Mars that we have. It's able to dig into Mars, put it on its own laboratory, and then send us the data back. And we'll continue to operate Curiosity for as long as we can. And then one of our smaller rovers, Opportunity, is still roving the planet. Its sister, Spirit, has died, but Opportunity is continuing to roam the planet as well. So we're getting data back from that one as well.
Exactly. I think it's interesting how most of the rovers built by NASA are still operational even far beyond their expected life. So we have the Opportunity rover, for instance, for more than 10 or 15 years, I assume. So the next question is basically I'd like to ask you about the mission control for the International Space Station. You mentioned that you were working there. So what if you would like to give it as a sort of a story? What was one of the most challenging situations that you faced while you were working there? Maybe the things that we don't read the news? Like, was there any serious situation, for instance?
Yeah, so most of the time, and this is a good thing, but most of the time it is quite boring in mission control. There's things happening all day, but they're not exciting in the way that the news might carry it. There's nobody's in danger, there's nothing bad happening. So they're very busy, but relatively quiet in terms of the action happening. There was one time on the mission STS-130 or 28, which is the final assembly point of the space station, and what we were putting up was called cupola. If you've ever seen the space station or pictures of it, it's the big, it's an end cap and it has all of the windows. So that's where astronauts largely go to take their pictures of the planet, whether they're studying the planet or just doing it for their own enjoyment. And it's called cupola. So we were attaching cupola, which was the very last piece we were putting on the space station. And during that, there was one time I can remember that was a lot of excitement, and it was very stressful because the astronauts, as much as they tried and they had all of the effort they could put into it, they could not take off one of the bolts in order to attach it. And it was stressful because it was a high-profile mission. We were finally completing the space station, and it had taken much longer and cost much more than we anticipated. And it was a big moment for us to finally get this last piece on, and the astronauts could not get the bolt loosened so that we could attach the piece to the space station. Eventually they were able to do it, and the person in mission control that supports them, the robotics person, was able to help them. But from my perspective, I had the video cameras, and because that's what I was operating. And so for me, it was just trying to get the right view so that people in mission control could see what the astronauts were trying to tell us. And the cameras are fixed, so I can move them up and down and move their field of view, but I can't move the physical camera. And so sometimes we were just limited to what you could see, and I wasn't sure if I could get the view so that our flight director, the person in charge of mission control, could actually see the bolt and what the problem was. And when you can see something, it's easier to fix it. And so that for me was the most stressful part of trying to help this team figure out how to detach the cupola from the vehicle, and then the vehicle came, and then be able to attach it to the space station. So it's probably the most exciting part I have. I'll tell you, mission control, while it's relatively quiet, the training to get to become a flight controller is the most exciting and the most stressful. You literally are sitting in a room, and you have all of your monitors. It's a simulator just like mission control, but everything breaks. You can't speak to the astronauts, you can't see the astronauts. We simulate a fire in the space station. It's all pretend, it's all simulated. But that's the most stressful point, because they want to train you so that when you go to mission control, it's not scary anymore. It's very normal. But the training is probably the highest pressure, most difficult part of being a mission controller. Same thing with me.
So yeah, I think that's very interesting, especially the training part when you have to experience everything going wrong. So that must be very, very interesting and stressful. So we just received another question that brings us back maybe to the initial point that we were talking about. Someone was asking about maybe if you have a recommendation of the best institutes to study astronomy or astrophysics around the world. If you have some tips regarding that. So
we don't usually mention any specific universities, but what I would say is finding an astrophysics or an astronomy program at a school that you can go to is the best that you can do. So finding that four-year university where you can get a degree in that area, if that's the area you want to pursue, and that's the area that interests you, is the most important thing. And then doing these outside types of learning opportunities is what's going to help you the most. And I'll send some of those as well.
Exactly. I think what makes the difference is the effort that you make in whichever institute that you're studying after all.
Exactly.
So another question is, and I think we have two more questions and we will wrap it up. So the question here is asking about the technology of the speed of spaceships. So currently, for instance, the Voyagers are the farthest from Earth, maybe by 18 to 19 billion kilometers. So when do you think that we will be able to bypass that and overcome or send a spaceship that will be farther than that from Earth? And is it going to be anytime soon that we will be able to have spaceships near the speed of light?
So the speed of light, probably not. That's just really fast, and that's beyond the technology that exists today, at least what exists today. I have no idea what will come in the future. Technology is moving at a very rapid pace in general across the world. So I think the future is whatever we can imagine it, and those who are younger than all of us can imagine it to be and what they do with it. So speed of light, not currently, not with the technology we have today, but who knows in the future. The first part, will you repeat that first part then?
I was asking about the time that you would expect for us to be able to send spaceships that will bypass the Voyagers, for instance, as being currently the furthest from Earth.
Yeah, so a spacecraft that would go even further than Voyager has?
Yeah.
Yeah, so right now there are no plans to go as far as Voyager. It's exciting that Voyager has even continued to run as long as it has run, and now it's an interstellar space that's officially left our solar system. We do have planned missions. Well, we have the New Horizons mission, which went to the Kuiper Belt and studied Pluto. For those who may not have seen it yet, we have stark, beautiful images of Pluto with high definition detail, much better than we had with the Hubble Space Telescope. For anyone who has not seen those images, we're going on the internet and looking at the images from New Horizons, which is the name of the mission, for the images of Pluto. And then they continue past Pluto into the Kuiper Belt, which is about as far as we have planned for now. In the future, if possible, we'll have more planetary missions to go beyond the Kuiper Belt, which would start going into the spaces where Voyager is, but nothing planned as of yet to go beyond our solar system in terms of an actual mission. James Webb will be probably the next capability we have to be able to see beyond our solar system, other than deeper than what the Hubble Space Telescope does. But we won't be traveling past the Kuiper Belt, or at least in the missions that we've done so far.
You mentioned something even about the funding. It's always the problem. Even sometimes the spaceships need to use the gravitational pull of planets to overcome the rocket's limitations. So the next question, and basically I got two of them, is targeting the requirements for becoming an astronaut. So you mentioned something about your training. For that, is there a specific academic degree that you have to have? You have to be a pilot, for instance. So what are the possible routes for any of us to apply as an astronaut?
Yeah, so the astronaut program, there are multiple countries that do select astronauts. For the US program, the requirements are fairly basic. You have to have a 4-year degree, so a bachelor's in engineering or sciences, or a professional degree such as a medical doctor. Most astronauts have PhDs. There's only a few that have bachelors, so most of them have a master's or a PhD. But the minimum requirement is to have a bachelor's, either in sciences, math, or engineering, or a professional degree like an MD. You have to have a vision requirement, so if you're a pilot, it has to be within a certain amount. I can't remember the exact anymore. And then if you're a non-pilot civilian like myself applying, then you have requirements of your vision as well. You can look those up at astronauts.nasa.gov if you're interested. You also have height requirements, and that's really just a physical being able to fit into a vehicle. So there's an upper limit, which I think has been raised somewhere to around 6 feet 4 inches. I don't know what that is in metric exactly, but you can probably convert yourself. And then the lower end is about 4 feet 10 inches, 4 feet 11 inches. So they've made that gap a little bit bigger, and so that more people are eligible as well. And then there's basic health requirements as well. You have to pass, and then there's deeper health requirements too. But just to be eligible, there's basic health requirements, including the vision scan, as well as no existing EKG for the heart, no existing issues with the heart, and no existing bone issues as well. We know that astronauts lose bone and muscle mass when they're in space, so we can't have existing issues with that. But the medical is a little bit difficult to discern because it's a case-by-case basis, and you go through medical testing if you were to get into interviews as well. So those are your main requirements. There's a few others if you were to look online, you'd see it, but those are the basic requirements. After that, it's really your interest. When they interview you, you don't know what they're looking for, and each time they're looking for something different. But often, we know they're looking for people who can be on a team. So if you're somebody who has to work alone, being an astronaut really wouldn't be for you. You have to be able to would rather be alone, not even just working alone, but just be alone. That's a little difficult because you can't have your own personal space. So these are the kinds of things you're looking at in personality. And then you also have to be able to survive. So people who like to hike and go up mountains, people who have adventurous spirits, you'll often see them in astronauts. People who play team sports, you'll often see those with the astronauts as well, because that gives us a sign that you're able to handle the more of the tough aspects of being an astronaut. And they go through survival training as well, should they ever be in that situation.
So maybe the last question that I'll be asking is also related to the possible ways of joining NASA. It's really interesting for me that many of the audience are asking about that. It's a good sign for me that there are many people who are interested in going into astronomy. So this particular question is basically asking about the most important criteria for joining NASA. Like, is it the academic achievement?
To be able to solve a problem efficiently than if you have one person trying to solve a problem all by him or herself. And so that's what we really look at, the interpersonal skills as well as the team capabilities of a person and the experiences of being on a team. So in the U.S., you'll often see in engineering programs around our universities, there is now a team component because a lot of the private companies and NASA have gone to those universities and said we really need students who are coming out with these degrees that know how to work on a team or have already had experience working on a team. And so over decades of working with our university partners, they also have seen the same need, and it's been integrated into the curriculum.
Okay, very good. So this was it basically for the questions. We'd like to thank you so much for your time and answering all of that questions and your great presentation. But before going, we would like to give an award on your behalf to a U.S. Embassy representative. So we'd like you to stay with us just to witness that. And of course, then he would have to hand it to you. So.
Thank you Dr. Mamta, thank you Engineer Abdulrahman for your time and effort. كما نشكر السفارة الأمريكية على إتاحة الفرصة لاستضافتها. تفضل أستاذ معاذ مصطفى المستشار الثقافي للسفارة الأمريكية لاستلام الدرع نيابة عنه.
شكرا جزيلا.
So thank you so much, Dr. Mamta. It was a great conversation with you, and hopefully we can repeat that on future events as well. Thanks so much for your time.